Hello dear students, welcome to the lecture 9 of Responsive Web Design with ASP.NET 5 and MVC Pattern and Bootstrap 5. So today we will continue from custom model validation. If you remember, we were left here. So let's start with cloning our previous lecture project as usual. Today I will also show you how to change namespace of the entire project. So we will also learn how to do that. It is a bit tricky, therefore we need to be careful. Okay, first start with renaming options, that whatever we can rename, we will. Okay, let's rename solution as well. Okay, however, we still need to rename our namespace. Therefore, you see I have to find all lecture 6 dot and change it to lecture 9 like this. Okay, replace all. Okay, 17 occurrences, and still not enough. We also need to change, there are other namespaces. Okay, like this. Okay, 6 more. Then we need to check properties and set default namespace as 9. Okay, are we still done? No, probably, but let's try. There is probably also csprosh file that we need to change. I just try to run it because I want to save all changes. Okay, let's open the csprosh file here. And you see, oh, it is already renamed. Nice. Okay, so it should work, I believe. Yes, it is working. Okay, so if you remember, we were doing custom validation in the previous lecture, which we had coded in lecture 8 class. Here you see it was inheriting validation attribute, and we were overriding the validation result. It was behaving according to our rules as we expect. Now we will continue with custom validation with IValidateObject, if I remember correctly. I think it is written here. Yes. Okay, let's start reading.
Custom validation with IValidatableObject. As an alternative to the approach we just saw, where we implemented a custom-made version of the validation attribute, we can make our model implement the IValidatableObject interface. By doing so, we can contain the logic needed for custom validation directly on the model class, instead of implementing a new class. This makes even more sense if the validation logic you're looking to add concerns more than one property, since the validation is now no longer tied to a single, specific property. The IValidatableObject interface only has a single method, validate. It should contain all the logic you need that can't be applied to your properties through the built-in mechanisms, so in other words, you are still free to combine both regular and custom validation. We have done just that in this new class called WebUserValidatable, but please notice that the class name doesn't have to include the word validatable or anything like that. You are still free to call it whatever you want.
Okay, I think to implement this, I will generate lecture 9. Okay, let's start with adding our model class. It will be a simple empty class, lecture 9. Then let's add our view. Okay, in new folder, lecture 9. Inside lecture 9, let's add index or custom name it one. We can do that. Let's call it as lecture 9 view. We can do as we want. It's totally fine. We also need a controller for that, and it will be name it as lecture 9 controller. Okay, so I will take the logic in lecture 8. I will modify it. So in lecture 8 class, this was our logic. I mean the model, not the logic. Okay, here. And now this class is going to inherit IValidateObject like this. So I need to add the necessary references, which are okay, data annotations. So we still have a problem. Why this is not working? IValidateObject provides a way for an object to be validated. Okay, so what is the lecture 9 does not implement interface member. Okay, so we need to implement member of validate, because since this is an interface, this is not a regular class, we have to code the interface, and the interface is this one, public IEnumerable validation result validate. Okay, so I will add it to here. So this is the validate interface, which this validate method, which this interface was expecting, and inside this validate I can write whatever I want. I will add some custom messages here. For example, you see this birthday, it says, and our birthday is set as DT birthday. Therefore, let's change it. You know that this means the properties or fields inside this class. So it returns, okay, this, surely you are not that old. It returns new birthday. What is the second? Okay, so the second parameter is the member name. So this member name will be equal to our parameter name. All right, because it is returning yield, return new. So it is using yield. Yield is a bit different thing. So let me show you. Okay. Let's understand yield return. It will be useful for you in future as well.
Once you understand having yield return in C# code, you will not help wondering what a return form or a special mechanism to handle it is. In the article below we will learn some programming techniques that revolve around C# yield return keywords. Quote from MSDN: the yield keyword signals to the compiler that the method in which it appears is an iterator block. The compiler generates a class to implement the behavior that is expressed in the iterator block. In the iterator block, the yield keyword is used together with the return keyword to provide a value to the enumerator object. This is the value that is returned, for example, in each loop of a for each statement. The yield keyword is also used with break to signal the end of iteration.
Okay, so here, this return will not return from the method immediately. It is used as a iterator, so it will return every case. It will check every case and it will continue to iteration. You see, it is returning an IEnumerable, but if it was returning only this one, it wouldn't be IEnumerable, so it can return multiple results. Here, this DT birthday is defining this result is belong to which element of validated, and it is belong to this one. Okay, so I don't need this anymore because it will be automatically validated here. So let's continue.
Iteration. 1. Method of operation of yield. When combined with the return mechanism allowing creation, the function returns a value that handles certain information in the loop and puts an end to certain conditions before it. This is contrary to the case of a normal return. I get a return value of the function that will return and finish the function at that point. But here, the function is to call back in the loop containing the yield return function that just ended. From here we can imagine an action that is rather abstract, but can be useful in some cases, to help keep code concise and tight. 2. Some requirements for the use of yield return: do not put yield in an unsafe block. Do not use ref or out keywords with the parameters of the method, operator or accessor, getter/setter. Yield return can only be placed in the try block if it is followed by a finally block. Yield break can be put in the try block and catch, but not placed in the finally block. Do not use yield of the anonymous method.
Okay, so here, yeah, it is not encapsulated with anything, so it can be used this way as well. So these are the useful practices.
3. An example of using yield return. To use yield return, you just need to create a method with a return type that is an IEnumerable, arrays and collections in. Net implements IEnumerable interface with a loop and use yield return to return a value to set in the loop body. Some examples are of a function with two arguments, int start, int number, made in even numbers starting from the starting number. The following is the code written in the usual way, transmitted to the and returns the result as an array, and then use one array to receive the value returned.
Okay, so this is the traditional way, probably. Let's open it. Okay, when we zoom in, we see that there is a function which takes two parameters, and this function defines a new array with the number, second number, and it makes a loop and calculates the array like this and return that array. Then this array is printed to the screen like this. Now let's see with yield return. So with yield return, you see we can iterate this function like this, and even though this is returning, it doesn't break this for loop. So it continues for looping, and each time it is returning an item. You see the logic here? It continues to loop, but it is not breaking the loop. So this is how it works. Okay, so we can also define other rules here. I will show that as well. We need to change our routing, which we do in our lecture 8 controller. So let's get this route into our lecture 9 controller. I will copy and paste. Okay, this is lecture 8 controller. Yeah, let's copy this, and this is lecture 9 controller. So let's remove routing for not a confliction because this is routing. And here, okay, this will take lecture 9. And to be able to use it, I need to add using lecture 9.models here. Okay, and it will return lecture 9 view, which we put under lecture 9 folder. Okay, here as well, and here as well. Okay, everything's correct. I will also update this update lecture 9 model. This is the action name in our view. Let's copy and paste it as well. This will be lecture 9 main page, lecture 9 model action name, and controller name. Let's modify our model. Let's say, where is it? Here, validation. So if it is below 19, we will say, are you sure that old? If you are below 12, okay. So let's change these to 1950 10 first, or let's make it this. Let's run the application and test. Are there any other thing that we need to do? Probably no. Let's run and see if it is working or not. Okay, lecture 9 main page, everything working. So let's first try 1950. Okay, I am going to change the year to 1950. Oh, how can I do that fast? It's a bit problematic. Maybe from here, 19. Yeah, let's try from here. Okay, so now we are at 1948 and it should not get saved. Submit. Okay, we have an error. We are still passing lecture 8 as a model in somewhere. Probably somewhere around here. Yeah, here. Refresh model 8 is our problem. We need to change this to refresh model 9, version 9, because we have generated a new model. Okay, lecture 9, and yeah, we don't need to change anything else. And here, we will refresh it to this one. Okay, and let's restart. I will also load repeating of email. So we don't need to enter it each time. I can set it. Yeah, I can set it here. I need to set it in refresh, I think. Here, yeah, we are not email and repeat. Let's first update to a valid date. Currently, we are only having a custom validation here like this for our birthday. So see, okay, we are still calling somewhere lecture 8 model. We have update user. Maybe this is the cause. No, this is not the reason. Or maybe in the view, yeah, we have to use lecture 9 as a model. Restart and see. And let's enter a valid date. So this should be valid. Update it. Let's refresh page. Yes, save it. Now let's enter an invalid date like 1945. Submit. So you see, this is our custom message. It says surely you are not that old. So this is another message that we are returning in our model. The values you have entered are invalid, therefore please fix the errors and try again. So let's try another invalid date as 2012. So it says sorry, you are too young for this website. Let's enter a value of December. So it returns both of the messages, as you can see. You see not only a single message, but both of the messages, because now that we are doing yield return, it is checking every case, not only a single case. So it is getting both of them. Refresh and try again to see. And let's change month to December. Submit. So you see there are two messages here. Actually, there is also two messages, but it is not visible, I believe. Let's check from code. Yes. You see there are, no, it only returns one for here. But on here, we see both of the messages. So also writing the summary of the error somewhere is good, because this only displays single error. But here we get both of the errors displayed as a summary. We can also add other custom verifications, such as we can force user email to start with letter A. Let's type it from beginning. If this.sr email starts with, we'll add something like this, email to, yeah, let's make it like this, A. Okay, if it is not starting with letter A, yields return new validation result. Sorry, your email has to start with letter A. Then we will return new array. Inside this array, we will type our email name, parameter name. Let's restart our application and see if it is working as intended or not. Alright, let me update email with AD. Let's try with GAD. Now it returns our error. Sorry, your email has to start with letter A. I will also enter an invalid date, so it should show that error as well. Here we can see all of the errors, and it is working perfectly fine as we wanted.
Summary. Implementing your own custom validation logic in your ASP.NET MVC project is very easy. There are two methods, one that ties directly to a specific property and one that ties directly to the model, allowing you to validate multiple properties at the same time.
Actually, I will prefer this method because I think this is better. However, the other one can also be used here. So with this approach, actually you can validate multiple different models as well. So this approach is specific to this model because it is inside this. However, the other method, which is this one, can be used for any model because you just simply define here. So I can just use this here as well. You see, it is valid. Perfectly valid. Next. Okay, client-side model validation. This was server-side. Remember that you always have to validate server-side. You can also validate client-side. That can be useful. That can reduce your server workload. That can be helpful for your clients, save their data, their time. However, never trust client-side validation because can be bypassed easily, manipulated, changed, modified, forged. Server-side validation is mandatory.
Client-side model validation. So far, all the model validation we have used in this tutorial has been done server-side. This means that the model is passed back to the server where the validation is performed according to your data annotations, and then a result is returned to the user. This is both good and bad. It's good because you can't trust client-side validation. The user can simply bypass or change any type of validation performed on the client. In other words, you always need to validate things on the server to make absolutely sure that everything is as you expect them to be. On the other hand, the extra round trip to the server makes the validation a bit slower, or a lot, if there's high latency between the server and the client, and it also raises the resource requirements for your web application. If a lot of users are accessing it at the same time, a lot of extra validation calls to the server will be made. So, to get the best from both worlds, you should first perform validation on the client. If any errors are found, you don't have to perform the server-side validation. Instead, you just immediately tell the user what's wrong so they can fix it. On the other hand, if no errors are found by the client-side validation, you make the call to the server and perform the validation there as well to make absolutely sure that everything is in order. Previously, this double validation approach would require you to write validation code in both C# or whichever server-side language you used for the server and in JavaScript for the client.
Okay, so this is really important. Previously, this double validation approach was cumbersome because you would have to spend extra time, duplicate time. It wasn't appropriate, as you can expect. However, now it is much easier with ASP.NET MVC Core. Let's see.
This was very cumbersome and could easily lead to inconsistencies. Fortunately for us, ASP.NET Core tries to solve this problem for us. When you use data annotations for your models, as described in previous articles, and you use tag helpers or HTML helpers to generate your forms with, the framework will automatically generate validation data for the elements.
So we are going to use tag helpers or HTML helpers. Okay, these are the key objects.
This data can be used by a JavaScript library for client-side validation, created by Microsoft on top of an existing JavaScript validation library for jQuery.
So, Microsoft JavaScript library will handle all the necessary work for us. We won't have to write anything.
This might sound complicated, but that's because good and robust validation is a complicated task. Therefore, I'm going to do a complete walkthrough of how you can achieve both server-side and client-side validation in your ASP.NET MVC application using the same model. The model. In our example, we'll create a form for creating a new user profile for our imaginary website. The first thing we'll define is our model, called WebUser, which is very simple. It uses data annotations for all relevant properties to indicate how the model should be validated. It looks like this.
We already have such model here. You see we have required, we have string length, display age. Let's continue with controller.
The controller. We have a controller called users controller so far. It only has two methods, and they are both called create. There's one for the get version, which will simply serve the view, and then there's the post version, which is called when the form is submitted to create the new user. It will check if the model is valid, which is done automatically, thanks to the data annotations, and then return the view. Here's how it looks.
We already have that here in our controller. Let's see that. In index with post method, you see we are checking if model is valid. If it is not, we are returning a message. We are setting a message in our model and we are returning it to the view and we display it.
The most interesting part is the check of the model state.isValid property. This is automatically filled by the framework after the model has been validated according to your data annotations. The view. The view is a pretty basic form to support the properties of the web user class. We'll use tag helpers, they are described in detail elsewhere in this tutorial, to generate labels, input fields and validation output. Notice how little markup we need to accomplish all of this.
We need to use tag helpers. Let's see where they are defined. There is nothing. So let's see where are the tag helpers. There is ASP4 label. So there is span ASP validation for. So I think we can add these tag helpers with our current form. So we have validation message for. Now we need to add validation for. How we gonna do that? We need to define it. There is label for. Yes, there is label. And there is input, which is text box for. Let's try it. So I will put this here and let's see if it will work or not. So this will be this, and I will add these necessary client-side scripts to the head section of my page for the H1. Let's add scripts. These probably got updated, but it worked. So this ASP validation for IR user ID should generate automatic code for client-side validation. Let's check the source code. We have validation for. There is data validation. Let's enter something like this. Okay, so you see it is automatically generated and now it should prevent. Okay, so it says that the entered value was not a valid integer. I am not able to post this anymore. You see it is not posting back to the server. Let's make it something like this. First name is supposed to be minimum 3. So when I submit like this, the submit happens. Let's check the network. I think it is even working right now without I need to add anything. Okay, I will test something. So I will remove this and remove these scripts and run the page. Okay, because I have an idea. I think when we add validation message for, it is automatically generating those, but to be sure, let's see. You could also generate your code like shown here. It is totally fine. Like here, actually this is even better, I think. But let's first verify this. Okay, so this is our source code. Let's put it here. Test. Okay, you see there is nothing appearing here until I postback. So postback happens and it says invalid. Now let's add our scripts here. Okay, let's enter something like this. Okay. When I click somewhere else, it says it is not a valid integer. When I click somewhere else, it says the error. Okay, I will try 12. Click somewhere else. Oh, our custom validation is not coming here. So it is still server side. Does this come? Okay, so let's try. Yeah, custom validation not appearing here, but the other ones are appearing here. Let's check the source code here and let's compare the source code. See if there is compare text differences. The diff checker is a good one. Okay, so let's put left side the new and the right side the previous. Okay, so in the source code there is no difference. So it is not available in the source code, but probably it is loaded as JavaScript bind to the elements. Okay, so in the source code no difference, but it shows here and it will not allow postback. So you see postback is not happening. However, if I remove these scripts like this, the postback will happen and it will not show me the error immediately. Let's retry. Okay, so I type like this, you see no error and I can submit. So I can also check the network, submit, and it is submitting. However, when we add the scripts, it is automatically generating necessary JavaScript. Let's see where can we see this automatically generated JavaScript. Since it is JavaScript, it is not visible on the source code, but maybe we can see it on Chrome. Event listeners in the elements. Let's try. For example, let's check this. Inspect. In the source code, there is no difference, but when we check the event listeners, here elements panel, we are there, and then event listeners, and here there is key down and there is key up. You see, in the key up, there is jQuery validate. It says use capture positive handler. This is the key up validate. So it is coming from validate. This is coming from my Kaspersky. Let's see the submit button if there is any. Okay, so in the submit button there is validate, and if I remove this script, I am pretty sure there won't be them. So this is how they are getting executed, how they are getting binded. Let's check again. Inspect event listeners. You see there is 0 event listeners right now. Assign it to this or submit button. When we add, there they are. And let's inspect event listeners. You see a lot of event listeners are bound from Kaspersky, submit, jQuery mean reset, hop state, invalid form, you see jQuery validate on receive. When we click submit, it will submitting and validating as expecting. Alright, everything is working as we wanted. We could also use like this. It is completely same. Let's also generate that as well. Yes, that's a good idea to generate that model as well. I mean that style, let's say, as well. So here we start with form method equal to post. Then we set our ASP.NET controller, which define form ASP controller. I would expect it to autocomplete, but it is not. Interesting. ASP controller will be lecture 9 controller. Oh, I think it is not even writing the controller part, so it will automatically check with lecture 9 controller. Then ASP action. So the action will be equal to, in our model, our action name in our controller actually. Let's check it out. Is update. This one. This. So this is the generic form. And then there is div. You can do all the styling you want. And then we will generate inputs. So the first input will be label. So the label will be equal to user ID. You see label, then it goes to the next line if you want, or you can keep them in the same line. I will do that. So there will be input like this, and input will be like this. Then we will add validation message. So input will by default go to the next line, probably user ID. Then we will make the other ones. So user ID, first name, first name, first name, first name, and in the first name we have a placeholder, so let's put that as well. Placeholder will be equal to please enter your first name. We can also put placeholder for this. Placeholder equal to please enter user ID. By the way, these placeholders will be visible only when there is no text entered to them. We will have last name. Last name, let's remove this. We get the idea. Last name, we have email repeated. So for email repeated, how do we check them whether they are matching or not? I think it is checked at the server side. So yeah, it will be automatically handled probably. Let's add email repeated as well. And then we have birthday, and the birthday will be like this. However, we will set the value of birthday. So this will have type as date. Value will be equal to same as here. So for value setting, we need to use model.dt birthday to string with custom. I think this should work. String format, string. Yeah, let's try like this. Then we have submit button and validation summary. So let's add a submit button, add user, and let's add validation summary. So to be able to use validation summary, what is the validation summary HTML form? Maybe span validation summary. Yeah, let's try that. ASP validation Okay, so this is a tag helper. It is like this, yes. Validation for and where is the validation summary? Oh, here. And div ISP validation summary for all. And then finally, we can show our model post result here as well. So let's run the application and see if it will work as expected or not. So you see, these placeholders are visible, but our values are not loaded because we didn't set them. However, date is loaded perfectly fine as expected. So let's also load our values. To be able to load them, you see we need to load value as equal to at model.IRUserID. Like this, value for our first name. Oh, this is last name, by the way. Okay, as our last name, this is our email. And here we need to set as our email repeated. Let's try again. Everything is loaded, so when we check the forms, I wonder if there is any difference. So there is form action method, no validate, it says. And we have ASP controller, lecture and ASP action. Oh, I wonder if this will work. Let's set this at DVB45. Okay, it said that you have an error. Apparently, we have ASP controller problem. Lecture 9 controller and update lecture 9 model. Here, I will just, comment this out to see what happens in the code behind. See posting correctly or not. So this is the controller name and action name. Okay, so my model has arrived. Okay, it is not valid. Why? Okay, because the values are not matching. Why is that, do you think? It is input like this, ASP for first name placeholder. Let's remove this and let's see how it is generating the source code so we can figure it out. What is the error? This model, we also have set the model here. For example, this has input value like this, ASP for as our first name, and this has input data val true, data val length. You see this has ID. So this ASP4 is not working. Why? Because there is ASP4 class 4 and ASP validation 4. Label ASP4 into ASP4. Form ASP action create. The generated codes are not same. Why? Core. Okay, so this is HTML. 4. This is ASP4. Label input and span ASP validation 4. ASP4 is not working. Okay, enabling tag helpers. I see. So to be able to enable them, I need to add tag helper. So let's add this into our Viv import file. So we will enable it in all our pages. And where is our Viv import file? It is, oh, we don't have it at the moment. Yeah, we didn't add it yet. So let's add it to top like this. So we need to add tag helpers and enable them, then they should work. Let's see. So this is how we add tag helpers. Okay, in the tutorial, it didn't enable tag helpers and it have added it, therefore it is not working. Okay, it says tag helpers still need to be manually enabled. And let's retry. Okay, now it is changed. You see, now I can also use like this. It's working. Let's update at user is valid true. Nice, it's working. It's updated. Awesome. So let's make it like this. DB5 and DB5. Nice, it is working. Let's try something else like this. It says, sorry, your email has started with a letter A. Let's try something this. Client-side validation also working. And when we delete everything, it shows the placeholder. All right, everything is working. It didn't post back yet because the email was not matching. Nice, it's working. So if I change values here, but I don't post back that, let's see what happens. Still updating because we are not pushing this button. They are different forms. So when I check the source code, there is form method action here, no validate and no validate. Yeah, it is working exactly as it should be. All right, nice. So now we can move to our next article. By the way, if you want to enable tag helpers in all your pages, then you should have a Viv import. We have seen that previously, Viv imports, and then it would be enabled in all pages by default.
When you reload the page, you will notice something cool. validation is performed automatically as soon as you start filling out the form, and if you click on the Create button, the form is only submitted to the server if the form appears to be valid. If it is, and then form is sent back to the server, it will be server-side validated according to the same rules which you have only specified in one place. This is really the beauty of tying together the various components of the ASP.NET Core framework. Please notice, the first line is just the regular jQuery framework. If you already include this elsewhere, you don't need to include this line. All references here are for a specific CDN, Content Delivery Network. You can choose another CDN or download the files and serve them directly from your website. All references here are for specific versions, jQuery version 3.4.1 and so on. You may want to check if newer versions are available. Summary. Validating user input has always been a pain. It requires a lot of effort and repetitive code, especially if you want both client-side and server-side validation. However, as shown in this article, the ASP.NET Core framework makes this task a whole lot easier, faster and more robust.
Yes, definitely true. So you see, after I have added this into my page, then the color of these are changed. You see, now it shows Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC View Features model expression. So now they are differently formatted, colored. So you should also expect this to see. Alright, let's move to the next.
Manual model validation with data annotations. When using model validation with data annotations, the MVC framework will usually handle most of the process of performing the actual validation and even presenting the results to the end user in the way you want it. However, as we already talked about, a cool thing about the MVC pattern is the separation of concerns. This means that while you may build a nice collection of models to represent all the data of your web application, these models can also be used outside of the MVC framework, e.g. in a desktop application. How is that possible? Because models are just regular .NET classes. But why would you ever need to use your models outside the MVC framework? Well, there's a good chance that you won't. It really depends on what you're working on. But as an example, consider a larger project where you need to automate some actions and run them directly from the command line instead of through the web server. This will allow you to schedule these actions through the Windows Task Scheduler or as a cron job on *Nix, without having to worry about timeouts and other web-related limitations. In a case like that, you can easily reuse your models in another type of application, e.g. a console app. Just add a reference to the project where you keep your models, which can be a separate project or part of your web project, and start using the model classes just like any other class. This is awesome, but what about validation? Since the MVC framework handles a lot of the magic involved in performing the actual validation, it's not quite clear how to take advantage of the validation rules you have added to your models using data annotations. Performing a manual model validation. Let me demonstrate how to accomplish this. We have the web user model which we used in previous examples in this chapter.
We already have something like this in our model. Let's review it. Here, our model which uses data annotations.
As you can see, its properties have been nicely decorated with validation annotations, specifying the various requirements. These rules are what we are looking to take advantage of outside of the MVC application. Therefore, I have created, within the same solution, a console app project to demonstrate this. Obviously, this is just to demonstrate an alternative use case for these mechanisms. You may use the same approach within your MVC applications in case you want more control over the validation process for some reason. Here's our console app.
In our console application, we have the same thing, and there is ValidatorTryValidateObject, user context results true is valid. How we gonna do it in reality? So you see, currently my model is using namespace lecture 9 models, and when I open my folder in my binary debug folder, I see lecture 9 DLL file. So let's compose a console application and add this DLL file as a reference to our project and see what happens. Create a new project, and since my model is public, I should be able to access all elements inside it, all properties, attributes, fields, and whatever there are. I will also compose a console application to demonstrate how we can do a manual validation and reuse our model. So I will save this as here, lectures, select folder, lecture 9 reuse model, or let's say CMD. It won't have a very long name. UC targets will be .NET 5 current framework. It's .NET Core actually, and this is just a rename. So this is a simple program, and now I am going to add project rep browse. I will use browse here. Let's copy and paste this to desktop so we can easily find it in the desktop. Lecture 9 DLL. Oh, see what happens. It is added, and now I'm going to add using lecture 9. So this is my namespace of other project, and now I should be able to generate a model from my lecture 9. So lecture 9 dot models dot lecture 9, my custom model. So I am a lecture 9 model. I am generating an instance of my model, and in here I want to use validate. I want to use validation. So how am I going to do that? I will set values such as birthday will be equal to new date time. For example, 1950 or 1959, 3 this lecture 9 model dot user ID 2 lecture 9 model dot email, make it like this, and lecture 9 model dot email repeated test, so it should throw an error. Lecture 9 model dot first name, lecture 9 model dot last name, this lecture 9 model dot post message none. We will set it later. What other property we have here? Let's see the tutorials. We are going to use this in our CMD project. Validation context. This validation context is coming from using system component model data annotations, and it will take my object instance. You see there is object instance, so it can be any object. Others will be null. Then it will return validation result. For validation result, I need to add system collections generic. Now we have results list. Then we will use is valid. Here Validator.TryValidateObject. So this validator is coming from system component model user annotations. We will validate our model. It will take context. So the context is validation context of lecture 9 model. Results will be this. So it is like try parse, and then there is true, so it will return true. Is valid is true or false. If it is not valid, we will parse the errors to the screen like this. Okay, if it is not valid, user is not valid, and validation results, you see error message. And let's run the application. It's a pretty simple code. We should be able to use our model in a completely different application. So it says user is not valid, errors, the field first name must be a string with minimum length of 3 and maximum length of 25. Email and SR email repeated do not match, done. Actually, we also have more errors, such as we have error of date time, right? We use custom validation here. However, it didn't work in our project. So this date was an invalid date, but it didn't work. Last name was also invalid. Oh no, last name we don't have we don't have any rule for last name. We have email for error. Let's change email. Oh, email also didn't work. So our custom validations didn't work in here because we are not using validate. We are using validation context. So it is doing a shortcut. Therefore, let's change it to something like this. Enter them like this and see what happens. No. This. So it should pass first name. Oh, now our custom validations are working. Yes. So first, it is checking these first validations. Then if all passes, it is checking this one. So both of them is working great. It is great. If we use like this instead of try, maybe we can use another thing. There is okay, yeah, now it is working fine. Yes, now it is doing further check, and it is showing the other errors as well. So there is also validate all properties flag. I think I will use that if there is such thing. Oh yeah, validate all properties true. Now it should show everything. So I will make them something like this. Oh, it says we have already given that. What other options there are? Anyway, it is working as expected. So it is doing a shortcut. There is also get object validation on errors. What is that? Let's see. validator dot get. No, we don't have that. Maybe it requires any some other reference. There is also IValidate. Okay, so there is another thing. Okay, we don't need that. We are getting everything we need. So if there is an errors, it will first display them. If there is no errors, it will go further, also check this validate. So first it is checking the regular validations here, and if they passes, it is checking this validation. So it is working as we have seen that. So let's also note that how to use your
Summary. Using just a few lines of code, we can take advantage of the validation rules specified on your models using data annotations and validate models wherever we want to and do whatever we want to with the results. This can come in handy in several situations, e.g., when you want to reuse the validation rules outside of the MVC framework or when you want full control of the validation process.
Okay, so the next will be tag helpers. Okay, where left. Okay, end of lecture 9. Hopefully see you next week.